at.
بظهر في اي حته باخد اللقطه، تعبكوا قوي ما انا حرق شطه، تلعب معايا يبقى انت في ورطه، ده اي كارت فيكوا جنبي او انت انا.
I sent it a bunch, okay? Okay, yeah, okay. There is a hit, I think it was a hit, okay? Yes, coming. No, there is a heat. I think that there was a heat as well. Okay, the smoke is from a heat. Okay. You know, I saw it, an explosion, and then smoke. I saw it.
That you see right now. We have a panel of experts with us alongside Colonel Cedric Layton. We also have CNN senior military analyst, retired Admiral James Stavridis, as well as Jason Rezaian, who was held prisoner in Iran for several years. I believe we're watching video from moments ago. This is what it looked like in the skies over Tel Aviv. Admiral Stavridis, I'm curious to get your perspective on what we're watching unfold right now.
Well, first and foremost, you just heard the assessment that these could be dozens of ballistic missiles. This will sound odd. I hope so. I hope it's only dozens. What we ought to be concerned about is not a few dozen that does pose a risk. A few may or may not get through. But if the Iranians go big here and launch 200, 250 ballistic missiles, and they coordinate with Hezbollah to the north of Israel, which has been knocked back considerably over the last year, but still has surface-to-surface capability and is parked right along that border. That confluence coming together could overwhelm the Israeli air defenses. And oh, by the way, this is not a choreographed moment as we saw before, where you have, as Cedric was correctly pointing out, U.S. Navy Aegis-class destroyers, which have incredible air defense capability and were aligned to be part of the air defense system, not in place right now. So let's hope it's going to be a relatively limited number. But if I'm working in Israel right now, I'm very concerned about what's happening, and all of us who are friends of Israel ought to be very concerned about what we're seeing.
And at this point, we're looking, Admiral, there appears to be at least a momentary pause. We do not see action being taken from Iron Dome or other missiles coming in. What are you looking at?
I canceled my Mid-Journey subscription because this AI does everything I need for a one-time cost.
Let's say you want to create a color.
We struck at the heart of Iran's nuclear enrichment program, targeting Iran's main enrichment facility. He added that Israel has also struck the heart of Iran's ballistic missile program and that this operation
that.
Of Iranian mentality and of Iranian political culture, if he believes that his request will do the trick. I don't think Netanyahu is really. I think that the agenda behind Israel's operation is really far from regime change to be carried out by the Iranian people themselves.
But in that statement, he was saying that he respected the Iranian people.
He said he respected the Iranian people, but he basically said, we'll tell you what's good for you. And by saying that, he again demonstrates an almost total misunderstanding of Iranian political culture, which highly resents attempts from the outside to impose any kind of political control on Iran. Well, Iranians are not great supporters of the Islamic Republic, surely. They support external attempts to tell them what to do and what to think and how to act, even less, significantly less. Just like Israelis have rallied around the flag that Netanyahu has hoisted with the strike on Iran, So are Iranians rallying around the flag as Iranian sovereignty is being violated in unprovoked, illegal fashion. Any attempt to suggest that this is the way to topple the Islamic Republic through a popular uprising is again as detached from reality as such an observation could be.
But might there be Iranians who do not agree with the Islamic Republic and are not in favour of the system under which they live?
There are plenty of Iranians who do not agree with the Islamic Republic. There are plenty of Iranians who do not like the Islamic Republic. But those Iranians don't take orders from Benjamin Netanyahu. There are plenty of Israelis who protest against Netanyahu on a weekly basis, who express great dislike and mistrust for him, but who are fervently supporting his strike on Iran, because when you rally the people around the flag, they will rally. Netanyahu's thought that Iranians will respond to this blend of threats and historical innuendo and cajoling, whereas Israelis are, doing the exact opposite, is, I think, demonstrative of the true, quote-unquote, respect he has for the Iranian people.
He also said that Israel's fight is not against the Iranian people. He said this is your opportunity to stand up and let your voices be heard. But you are describing it as a threat.
It's very much a threat, and I think it's a threat that's already been substantiated. Israel has killed, I think the number is now up to 110 people, many children as well, in its strike on Iran. It continues to kill. Our Minister of Defense expressed his anger for Iran after Iran bombed civilian districts. Israel did very much the same as it bombed in the heart of Tehran. Any attempt to think that such violations of Iranian sovereignty, such blatant, again, unprovoked attacks on Iran, I think there's a general consensus among the Israeli community that this is not a preventive strike. Any attempt to suggest that such a politically motivated strike is actually altruistic in nature, calling on the proud people of Iran to fulfill their potential and do Israel's bidding, is very much disrespectful to the Iranian people.
What do you think Benjamin Netanyahu's objective is? Is it that he's hoping that the revolution comes from within Iran?
No, I really don't. I think his objectives and his agenda are mostly domestic. I think that the strike on Iran, which has been planned for months and is therefore not a preventive strike, unless you take preventive to mean anything from the beginning of time, I think the strike is meant very specifically as an attempt to divert global attention from what Israel is doing in Gaza. I think Israel has reached the end of its rope, has exhausted its options in Gaza, has no idea what to do anymore. And so the strike on Iran is an attempt to rally the world around Israel again, using very familiar tropes like the Holocaust and Israeli victimhood and Iranian intentions. But what we actually have here is a country that has, according to various reports, hundreds of nuclear devices deliverable on various platforms. That is Israel attacking a country for merely considering the notion of developing a civilian nuclear program. Remember, Israel is attacking Iran not because it's building a nuclear bomb. It's attacking Iran because Iran demands the right to enrich uranium to a 3.67% level. So I think any attempt to consider what is actually happening on the ground as fairly as possible very quickly removes from Netanyahu's arguments any modicum of decency or veracity.
You're suggesting that the initial attack on Iran is a diversionary tactic to take the eyes of the world away from Gaza, but we know that this attack has been planned for, if not months, some years, we've been told.
Sure, and it was timed precisely to be carried out exactly when it was needed the most. It was not needed the most because Iran was days away from constructing the bomb. Even the IAEA report, which accused Iran of real violations of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, even that report did not expose any kind of dramatic information. By the way, the IAEA itself said that this was the first time in 20 years when Iran had violated its commitments. Israel has been accusing Iran of serially violating those commitments for 20 years. So what's there to trust in the Israeli version? This attack on Iran has been planned for a long time. It offers redemption to two of the main players on the Israeli political scene. One is Prime Minister Netanyahu, and by proxy his government, but the Israeli military as well. Both have abysmally failed in Gaza. They have not met a single goal they set themselves when the Gazan campaign began. Moving the battlefield to Iran, using technology, awing the world through the use of sophisticated spy equipment and potential and capabilities is a great way of making the world forget what is happening in Gaza when it's combined with a blockade and a siege on the West Bank and the removal of internet and communication capabilities from Gaza. I think we can see where Israel's true interest lies.
Is there any way, in your estimation, to move from an escalation in this situation, to move from war?
Of course there is. War is a political tool, and its execution is dependent upon political decisions. Israel doesn't want to move away from war. Israel has been pursuing a forever war throughout the Middle East over the past 2 years. It has demanded the right to do whatever it wants to whomever it wants, whenever it wants, without paying any kind of price for doing so. That is very clearly Israel's stated agenda. That is Israeli security as it is now defined. Israel has to make this decision. The Iranians have retaliated. I doubt they've retaliated with their full strength. I don't think we will see an Iranian response that is even remotely equal to what Israel has done today, partially because Iran has inferior capabilities, but also because the Iranians have consistently made the effort to preserve options for further action that are not exclusively limited to war. Israel knows only war. That is what its leadership is pursuing.
So from what you're saying, Iran is the party that can de-escalate the situation at present?
Well, Israel can as well, should Israel choose to go against its record, certainly over the past 2 years. But yes, I think the keys lie with Iran. I think Iran historically likes the position of the responder rather than the initiator. And I believe we will see interesting developments over the next few days from Iran, including the pursuit of its case through international institutions. And I think it has a fine case because Israel has violated the international law that governs the relationship between sovereign states. I think we will see various steps on Iran's part, not all of them, perhaps not even most of them, warlike.
We have seen a retaliatory strike from Iran.
We have.
Do you believe that will be the end of it? It allows Iran to save face that they have responded, they haven't been attacked and not done anything about it. Will that be sufficient, or will there be more attacks from Iran on Israel?
Remember that there will also be more attacks from Israel on Iran. It takes two to tango here. I don't think this is the end of it. I think we have a few more days at least of hostilities. I think Israel may be tempted to go after Iranian oil processing plants and perhaps power stations and other what we call national infrastructure installations. If that happens, Iran will try to attack such installations in Israel as well. Ultimately, I don't see this escalating into a full-fledged war. Nobody wants this war, except perhaps for Israel, but even Israel is not interested in a fully blown regional war. I think we'll see an exchange of fire that will be broader in scope and intensity than the one we saw last year. Ultimately, I think this will calm down, and I think Iran holds the keys because Israel is incorrigible at the moment. This is the only thing Israel knows how to do.
And what international interventions do you think we'll see? We've already heard, well, we've learnt this evening that the US has assisted Israel in shooting Iranian missiles down.
My impression is that even Israel's friends are distancing themselves from the Israeli cause. They are saying that they're in it to defend their own nationals and their own assets and nothing more. I think that if this gets complicated, there's a very good chance that Trump will walk away. Trump has taken credit for Israel's first successful day of strikes because this is a success. Trump does not like to take credit for failures. Notice how he has not taken credit for Gaza, despite giving Netanyahu carte blanche. So I think a lot depends on the tit for tat that we will witness over the next few days. Again, I think Iran stands to gain a great deal from demonstrating restraint, from being the bigger man. And I believe that ultimately both sides will come to the realization that they're not interested in full-fledged war and will pursue a path that will allow both to save face simultaneously and wind down this round of hostilities.
You say that President Trump has given Netanyahu carte blanche. How so?
Well, remember that in Gaza, he basically told him as much. I'll give you the arms you were promised. Now you do what you want. I'm not taking any responsibility for it. I believe that the United States did not help to orchestrate this offensive. I don't think it aided it actively. I think what Trump told Netanyahu is, go ahead and try. If you make it, then I'll be happy to share part of the credit. If you don't, it's your problem. So I believe that Trump is happy to step in and receive some of the limelight. I think Trump still really does want a deal that may demonstrate his great naivete, but I think he definitely wants a deal. And I think that's what he's going to try and press for. I think this would be a good chance for powers like Russia and China to actually step in and try diplomatic efforts. And I think it may be a good chance for the global North and the global South to work jointly to end these hostilities. Nobody wants them, but I think it's a general consensus in the Middle East that nobody but Israel is interested in a war. And I believe that if all parties display such prominent disinterest, the chance of war is low.
Ori Goldberg, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us, Israeli political analyst there. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, still with us, our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who's in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you had a little bit of that interview, Mark, but Ori Goldberg there saying that Donald Trump definitely wants a deal, but we know that he said that Iran should accept a nuclear deal, and if they don't, there will be further brutal action.
Yeah, I wonder if the reason we haven't actually seen Donald Trump yet today release with any sort of televised statement or anything is because he's just waiting to see what happens before he passes judgment and either admits that he was fully involved in all of this all along or tries to distance himself if things are not looking to his pleasure, then he'll somehow manage to distance himself. I'm just looking at these pictures now, which they're not live, latest pictures, but you can see some what looks like Iron Dome missile defense systems activated over Jerusalem, and this certainly is that as well. I don't know how long ago these were, but it has been a pretty sustained barrage of missiles, the Iranian counterattack over the course of the last few hours from what happened overnight last night. I just wonder when we'll hear from Donald Trump. It is quite surprising that we haven't yet heard from him. I was struck too with your last guest, his view that this is not a war. Oddly, the sort of the vibe that we're getting from other commentators within Israel is that this is Israel at war with Iran. This is not an operation, not a strike, but a war. What is very clear is that what happened last night was planned over many, many months. I mean, remember, it's for 30 years or so that the Israelis have been calling on the world to do more to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. I think it was 2012 that Benjamin Netanyahu, he was prime minister back then as well, famously stood in the chamber of the United Nations with a kind of cartoon drawing of a bomb, showing how close Iran was back then to obtaining a nuclear weapon. I think what has happened over the course of the past few weeks, if we are to take the Israelis at face value, is that they clearly saw that a number of things happened at the same time. Iran, they believe, became critically close to getting a nuclear weapon. They also believe that, and they say they have intelligence to back this up, although they haven't released it at the moment, that there was some sort of planned, coordinated attack by, yes, the very depleted Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Iranian proxies in Iraq as well, all of them working together. There was a plan, so claim the Israelis, to carry out a coordinated attack on Israel soon. So the fact that Iran was very close to getting a nuclear weapon, the fact that they claim this intelligence represented a clear and present danger to the homeland, plus the confidence that they have that they believe that the Iran's ability to actually attack Israel using its proxies had been degraded. I mean, those two things, as I'm talking, they do seem contradictory, but yet from the Israeli perspective, they're putting all this together, and they believe that now was the perfect opportunity to carry out what Benjamin Netanyahu has wanted to do for so long. And what is also clear is that it was shock and awe early with the first strike, where they hit 100 jets. They had Mossad agents on the ground. They took out nuclear scientists. They took out Revolutionary Guard leaders, missile sites, nuclear facilities, all in one go in one night. It was an extraordinarily audacious attack to try and degrade Iran proper, the Iranian homeland, quickly, swiftly, and prevent them from carrying out any sufficiently capable counterattack.
Okay, Mark, for the moment, thank you. Just want to bring you some live pictures from Tel Aviv, just showing some of the damage that has been wrought on the city. Emergency workers, we can see there, working under the glare of light. There's wreckage of a car. And yes, you can see the damage to that building there. That looks like a car at the top. I don't know if that's a car park, multi-storey car park that's been hit, but quite devastated there by the missile that struck earlier this evening. Well, let's take you to our guest in Tel Aviv. We can speak to Yossi Beilin, former Minister of Justice and initiator of the Oslo Agreement. Good evening to you. Good evening. The first question that I'd like to put to you is that this strike on Iran is the result of months of planning.
No question. I mean, it was well planned. The different security forces, arms in Israel, coordinated in order to achieve it. And it is, I must say, a very, very big surprise to see something so much coordinated and sophisticated like that.
Mr. Beilin, sorry to interrupt you. I wonder if you might just stay on the line for us. We want to go to the UN because the UK representative is speaking now.
That this crisis escalates with serious implications for peace and security across the region and beyond. This is in no one's interests. Colleagues, our first priority must be to prevent further escalation in the Middle East. We urge all parties to urgently step back, show restraint, and reduce tensions. The UK did not participate in this action. And let me say clearly and unequivocally that Russia's claim that British sovereign bases on the island of Cyprus were in any way involved is nonsense. It is deeply irresponsible at moments like this for Russia to be spreading disinformation. We firmly support any diplomatic efforts to return to stability. Today, we have spoken to Israel at the highest levels, and our Foreign Secretary has also spoken to Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi. We have urged both sides to show restraint and de-escalate tensions. We continue to engage partners across the region to ensure we are collectively doing our utmost to push for a peaceful outcome. The UK, in partnership with the E3, has always championed a diplomatic solution to address Iran's nuclear escalation, which has no credible civilian justification. We will not be deterred from this. As my Prime Minister said today, we have long held concerns about Iran's nuclear program, as documented by the IAEA. Israel also needs to protect its people and security. It is therefore in the interests of all actors to stop military confrontation and pursue a negotiated solution. President, this is time for a strong, united position from members of this Council. We must take urgent action to de-escalate and provide an opportunity for a return to diplomacy. I thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for her statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me begin by thanking...
So that ending the statement from the UK representative there speaking, saying that the first priority is to prevent further escalation, show restraint and reduce tensions. She did say that the UK did not participate in this action, and Russia's claim that British sovereign bases on the island of Cyprus were in any way involved is nonsense. We firmly support any diplomatic efforts to return to stability. So that's the theme of all the speakers we've heard thus far at the UN Security Council meeting this evening, that restraint should be maintained by both sides. Well, let's now return to our guest, Yossi Beilin, former Minister of Justice and initiator of the Oslo Agreement. And where we left our conversation is that you were describing that this was very much a planned operation.
Yeah, it was a sophisticated one, but of course, I mean, the preference is always to have a diplomatic solution and not something like that. But at that moment, at that point in history, it seemed quite impossible to get a diplomatic solution. And especially after the 60 days in which the United States negotiated with Iranian representatives, President Trump spoke about these 60 days that he would give the Iranians, and the war erupted on the 61st day. So because it seemed impossible not to have a diplomatic solution, and on the other hand, allow Iran to rush to to have a nuclear power. This is something that Israel cannot accept. The free world cannot accept. You heard your own representative in the UN loud and clear. The point is that Iran is a rogue country with arms in different places in the Middle East. These arms became much weaker in the last year and a half, and for whatever reason, Iran decided to rush to nuclearization, and neither us nor the Americans or Britain can accept something like this. So it is not enough to say we prefer diplomatic solutions, as we all say as diplomats, because we really prefer it. But in that case, if we just say, okay, now we stop the war, it means that Iran will have a free hand to continue what the IAEA found out just a few days ago, that they are doing exactly what they said they would not do.
Iran would say that their nuclear progression isn't for malevolent use.
I don't trust them. With all due respect, it is a lie. We all know it.
Do you believe that it was the correct decision to strike Iran at this time?
Yes. Yes, I all the years I was against it. But I saw that the time came and they are on the verge, if not cross the verge, of nuclearization, and not for benevolent targets. So that and since they failed to have an agreement with the Americans, Israel said that we cannot just go on and comply with something like this. Now, here you see a real understandings between right and left in Israel. Unlike, for example, our attitude to the war in Gaza right now, when we are saying that it is long overdue and that we have to stop it. This war of today was justified. And again, I mean, I know so well this situation when you sit in the UN and you say that we prefer to have an agreement between the parties and to end the war. It is so rational and logical and obvious that I almost want to say, okay, me too. But if it happens, we cannot expose ourselves to the continuation of the situation whereby a rogue country like Iran is having nuclear power. It is a danger for the world.
How do you envisage it ending, though?
It will end because I presume that the Americans and the Iranians will return to some kind of talks between them. I hope that it won't happen after we really kill each other and hurt each other, and eventually also civilians are paying the price on both sides. It is much better to go back to the negotiating table right now rather than in weeks or in months from now.
I was speaking to Ori Goldberg, Israeli political analyst, earlier, and he was saying, in his opinion, that the strike on Iran was, the purpose of it was to deflect international attention from what's going on in Gaza. How would you respond to that?
Nonsense.
Because?
Because you see, I mean, it is not that Israel is divided and the center left is saying that Netanyahu is doing these things in order to divert the attention to something else. We are living under this shadow for years and years. I remember Prime Minister Rabin saying that this is the biggest threat on Israel almost 40 years ago. Or 30 years ago. This is a real threat knocking on our door. And for years, Israel was able, by different activities, to defer the moment of nuclearization of Iran. But this is the moment. I mean, the fact that there is a consensus around it is very telling. I mean, if somebody like myself is saying that it is a justified war, believe me, I'm far from being neither a supporter of Bibi or a warmonger. But Iran is as cynical as one could think. The damages that Iran caused to the world, to the region, and to Israel are endless. With Hezbollah, with Hamas, with the Houthis, with the others, they are all arms of Iran. And now with the nuclearization. So enough is enough. And to blame Israel that it is in order to divert attention is unfair and wrong.
You describe it as a justified war. Right. How do you expect Iran to respond?
They will retaliate. I mean, we see what is happening. I mean, we are always in the medievals. One attacks, the other retaliates. People die on both sides. They are bleeding, they are wounded, and eventually they find some kind of modus vivendi.
But many lives potentially lost before that point.
Exactly. This is why people like me are against wars, but I'm not a pacifist. I mean, I cannot say that we will never have a war. And I was convinced that this attack on Iran today was needed.
What did you make of Netanyahu's direct address to the Iranian people, in which he was essentially asking them to rise up? He said that he respected them. He said that Israel's fight is not against the Iranian people. Our fight is against the murderous Islamic regime that oppresses and impoverishes you. You know, this is your time, basically. They're clearing the path for you to achieve your freedom. What did you think of that video address?
I don't believe that such an address will convince them, but the point is that people of our age still remember the very close relationship between Iran and Israel. It's not a situation like it was with Jordan or with the Palestinians or with the Egyptians, that before making peace or agreements, we were always struggling against each other. No, I mean, Iran was not just a country with which Israel had peace until 1979. We were very, very, very close. So it is, I mean, for us to see the Iranians as enemies seems always as something which is very artificial and which happens because of the 79th revolution, which, of course, made their life miserable. Not that under the Shah, they were very happy and that there was a democracy. No, it wasn't. But for sure, when you meet Iranians abroad and you listen to them, very few of them would say any good word about the Ayatollahs. So there is no question that most of them are suffering. And but to call them publicly and to say, do this because you will better your life if you are protesting against the regime, usually it doesn't work.
So you don't think the Iranian people will respond to that call from Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I'm afraid not. Right.
Very interesting.
I would like to see that, of course, but I saw what happened in the previous demonstrations, where the attitude of the police, the religious police, against the protesters was so cruel that they are afraid to take to the streets.
Yossi Beilin, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and knowledge with us. Thank you. Yossi Beilin there, former Minister of Justice.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Initiated the Oslo Agreement. Well, let's stay in Tel Aviv. We've seen these pictures coming in tonight of a building that appears to have been hit by one of those Iranian missiles. We can see the emergency services gathered at the scene there. Obviously, under cover of night, the scene being lit up at various points, so you're not able to see exactly the full scale of what we're looking at. But in the past few minutes, we've heard from one of those search and rescue workers.
I'm Yossi Greiver. I'm a search and rescue officer in the Dan County of the Homefront Command. We're here in a demolition site in the middle of Ramat Gan, a civilian area that was attacked by the Iranian regime and destroyed a lot of buildings and hurt innocent civilians who were sitting in the houses, eating their Shabbat meals, and suddenly a missile hit their house, and some of them were injured, some of them are trapped, and we are here to rescue them and take them out and help them to get to a safer place for a better than here.
What can you say about the hit? Is it a big missile? It's one of the hardest we've seen in recent years.
It's one of the serious hits we've seen recently. Probably, as you know, in the last 2 years, we have many incidents of missile and rockets from all kinds of different areas from the Hezbollah in Lebanon, from Gaza, and from now from Iran. And we are here to help them to search and rescue all.
Let's take you straight to the UN Security Council and hear from the Iranian representative.
Israel's unlawful act of aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran, a grave violation of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. I address the Council today on behalf of the people and government of Islamic Republic of Iran with the utmost urgency and grave alarm. Madam President, last night, the Israeli regime, the most dangerous and terrorist regime in the world, with full intelligence and political support from the United States regime, conducted a series of coordinated and premeditated military attacks across multiple cities in Iran. These acts of aggression and unlawful strikes target peaceful nuclear facilities, military sites, vital civilian infrastructure, and residential areas. Among the key targets was the Natanz nuclear facility, a safeguarded site under the full monitoring of the International Atomic Energy Agency. Madam President, we strongly and unequivocally condemn the barbaric and criminal attack. A series of targeted assassinations were against senior military officials, nuclear scientists, and innocent civilians. So far, 78 people, including senior military officials, have been martyred and over 320 others injured. The overwhelming majority of them civilians, including women and children. Earlier today, Israel continued its act of aggression against Iran, once again targeting multiple civilian and military sites across several Iranian cities. These deliberate and systematic killings were not only illegal, but inhuman, a chilling display of calculated aggression. These atrocities constitute clear act of state terrorism and flagrant violation of international law. Madam President, the inaction of the United Nations, the Security Council, and the IAEA, despite repeated and documented warning by Islamic Republic of Iran regarding Israeli threats against its nuclear sites, have seriously undermined the credibility and authority. Their silence in the face of repeated Israeli provocation has emboldened this rogue regime to escalate its violation and cross every red line. Let us be clear. This reckless attack on safeguarded nuclear facilities defied not only the fundamental principles of international law, but also basic common conscience. Any damage to these facilities risks catastrophic radiological consequences that would not be confined to Iran, but could spread across the region and beyond. Only a regime devoid of humanity and responsibility would endanger millions of lives in pursuit of its destructive ambitions. These actions stand in direct violation of numerous legal instruments, including the IAEA Statute, the Treaty of Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, the Geneva Convention, and multiple Security Council and IAEA General Conference resolutions, all of which prohibit attacks or threats against nuclear facilities under safeguards. Above all, this aggression is a grave breach of the United Nations Charter, particularly Article 2, Paragraph 4, which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any member state. Israel also violated Iraq's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The permanent mission of Iraq today formally protested and condemned this violation of its territorial integrity in a letter to the Security Council and the Secretary General. Madam President, those who support this regime with the United States at the forefront must understand that they are complicit by aiding and enabling these crimes by They share full responsibility for the consequences. Supporting Israel today is supporting war crimes, crimes against humanity, and deliberate undermining of global peace and security. The Israeli regime's long-standing crimes against the oppressed Palestinian people, its repeated violation of the sovereignty of regional countries, and its possessions of undeclared weapons of mass destruction have made the Middle East a cauldron of chronic instability since its creation. It is long overdue for the international community to act. This regime must be disarmed of all weapon mass destructions, placed under international supervision, and held fully accountable. Madam President, this is not a regional issue. This is not merely an attack on one country. This is a direct assault on the international order, an attack on the Charter of the United Nations, the UN system, the global nuclear non-proliferation regime, as well as the authority of the IAEA. Israel's leadership, including its criminal prime minister, has shamelessly and publicly claimed responsibility for these heinous acts. Israeli officials say that this aggression aims to wreak nuclear talks. This confession alone is enough to reveal the real motive behind the attack: to kill diplomacy, to sabotage negotiation, and to drag the region into wider conflict. This leaves no room for denial. Furthermore, the aggression was intentional, coordinated, and fully backed by a permanent member of this Council, the United States. The United States' complicity in this terrorist attack is beyond doubt. The officials of the United States have expressly and brazenly confessed the willful aid and assistance in the crimes and gross violation that Israeli regime committed as of last night, including the deliberate transfer of arms. We will not forget that our people lost their lives as a result of the Israeli attacks with American weapons. These actions amount to declaration of war. They are the latest in a long and well-documented pattern of lawless, destabilizing, and aggressive behavior by the Israeli regime, a regime that acts with impunity because it is shielded by powerful allies. This must end. Madam President, the Security Council must act now, firmly and decisively. In 1981, this very council responded unanimously to the Israeli military attack on Iraqi Osirak nuclear reactor by adopting Resolution 487, which unequivocally condemned the aggression as a flagrant violation of the Charter of the United Nations and international law. The Council also called on this criminal regime to refrain from any such acts or threats in the future. Had the Council enforced that resolution and held Israel accountable at that time, this regime would not have been emboldened to continue this unlawful behavior with impunity. The current aggression is a direct consequence of decades of inaction and double standards. Madam President, the Islamic Republic of Iran reaffirms its inherent right to self-defense as enshrined in Article 51 of the UN Charter. Iran will respond decisively and proportionately to these acts of aggression at a time, in a place, and by means of its choosing. This is not a threat. This is the natural, legal, and necessary consequence of an unprovoked military attack. Iran's response will be firm, lawful, and essential to restore deterrence, defend our sovereignty, and uphold the principles of international law. No aggressor can be allowed to act with impunity. Madam President, we have requested this emergency meeting because we expect this Council to fulfill its Charter mandate. The Security Council must condemn, in the strongest possible term, Israeli unlawful aggression. It must take immediate, concrete measures to hold the Israeli regime accountable and to prevent the further corrosion of international peace and security. Anything less would signal to collapse of the international system and invite chaos. Let me conclude with a simple and undeniable truth. Israel attacked Iran. Israel violated international law and the UN Charter, and Israel must be held accountable. The Security Council must act now and stop this act of aggression immediately. Silence is complicity in this crime. I thank you.
Thank the representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Israel.
Madam President, first I would like to thank USG DiCarlo and Director General Grossi. Madam President, Israel has acted to prevent its destruction, and the world now stands at a crossroad between denial and clarity. This is not only a defining moment for Israel, it is a defining moment for the global security order and for the credibility of the international system. As we speak, hundreds of ballistic missiles with conventional payloads are striking Israel's cities, neighborhoods, communities. They are striking population centers, not military bases, not Air Force bases, cities. Dozens are injured, 2 of them in a critical condition, and we are still following the news. Now take a moment and imagine if today that radical regime had nuclear warheads for those missiles. Last night, the State of Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a preemptive military operation carried out with precision, purpose, and the most advanced intelligence at our disposal. The mission was very clear: dismantle Iran's nuclear program, eliminate the architects of its terror and aggression, and neutralize the regime's ability to follow through on its repeated public promise to destroy the State of Israel. For years, Iran has declared its intent. Its leaders have spoken without hesitation. Less than a month ago, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei called a, quote, cancerous tumor that must be eradicated. IRGC commanders have vowed to, quote, open the gates of hell on Israel. This is a picture from the main square in Tehran. The streets of Tehran display a countdown clock. At the time of the photo, you can see it in Arabic, it was at 8,411 days. It is tracking the regime's planned timeline for Israel's destruction, paid by the government, putting it in the main squares in Tehran. These threats have been made on a near-daily basis. Never again will we dismiss such threats. For too long, the world convinced itself that these were just words, that genocidal slogans and threats to erase us could be ignored or rationalized. But Israel has never had that luxury. We know our enemies. We know their ideology. And when a regime builds ballistic missiles, enriches uranium to near weapons grade, and openly declares its intent to destroy us, we believe them. We take them at their word. And we take action before it is too late. Colleagues, Israel did not act recklessly. We waited. We waited while Iran enriched uranium to 60%, a level with no civilian justification, and a level that brings the regime within days of a nuclear breakout. We waited while the IAEA reported that Iran had obstructed inspectors, destroyed monitoring equipment, and accelerated its covert special development program. We waited while Iran developed trigger mechanisms, detonation systems, and plans for warheads. We waited while its leadership actively recruited more nuclear scientists. We waited while Iran constructed a ballistic missile industry so large and sophisticated, and we can expose it now, that it was intended to challenge even the US and Russia in ballistic missile capabilities. They cannot deny it. We waited for diplomacy to work. We gave the international community time. We watched negotiations stretched on as Iran made forced concessions or refused the most fundamental conditions.
Good evening, it's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10. We are going to take you straight away to the Israeli representative speaking at the UN Security Council about the attacks on Iran from Israel and the counterattacks from Iran. Let's listen in to what he has to say.
This included Muhammad Hussein Bagheri, Chief of the Armed Forces, Hussein Salami, Commander of the IRGC terror organization, and Ghulam Ali Rashid, Commander of Emergency Command. These men directed Iran's conventional military forces and terror forces. They coordinated the terror network that has plagued our region for decades. Seeing how many meetings you had here about the proxies of Iran in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Gaza. Second, we struck Iran's military infrastructure, specifically the surface-to-surface missile array. Israeli Air Force fighter jets, guided by precise intelligence, completed a series of strikes against the Iranian regime's missile capabilities. Dozens of launchers, missile storage facilities, and additional military sites were destroyed. Late last year, Iran launched wave after wave of ballistic missiles at our cities. They deliberately targeted civilians. The destruction of these missile systems is a moral imperative. These are weapons with the capacity to reach thousands of kilometers. Leaving them in the hands of a radical regime, one that openly dreamed of wiping our nation off the map, was not an option. We will not hesitate. We will not relent. And we will not allow a genocidal regime to endanger our people. Third, we struck the core of the nuclear program, the underground enrichment facilities at Natanz. This facility was operating at a military-grade capacity. Intelligence confirmed that within days, Iran could have produced enough material for multiple bombs. We targeted the heart of that effort. Madam President, this operation was carried out because the alternative was unthinkable. How long did the world expect us to wait? How long? Let's speak about it. Until they assembled the bomb? Until they mounted it on a Shahab missile? Until it was en route to Tel Aviv or Jerusalem? Like the more than 100 missiles that they sent an hour ago? How long should we wait? And if anyone in this chamber still believes Iran would never use such a weapon, I invite you to remember October 7. On that day, we saw what Iran's proxy Hamas was capable of. And then in Gaza, they did it with Kalashnikovs, with grenades. They butchered families, they burned children alive, they mutilated women. Imagine what the head of the snake would do with a nuclear warhead. To that end, we uncovered intelligence revealing a multi-front plan directed by Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas for a future assault on Israel. This one would be far more sophisticated than October 7. It envisioned mass missile launches, first from Iran, then from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, followed by coordinated infiltrations of our borders. The plan was not aspirational. It was operational, and it was nearing execution. This council has convened countless times in recent months. You have passed resolutions, called for restraint, demanded ceasefire. You met in emergency sessions when Hamas was under threat. But when Iran marched toward nuclear capability, you said nothing. When they crossed line after line, you drew none of your own. So we acted. We acted to ensure our people live. We acted so that Jewish children in Jerusalem will not wake up to the sound of air raid sirens triggered by a nuclear launch. We acted so that Iranian missiles will not carry radioactive payloads into civilian neighborhoods. We acted because history has taught us that silence is complicity and hesitation is fatal. We acted because 80 years ago, the Jewish people made a promise to ourselves, never again. That promise applies to a nuclear holocaust as well. This was an act of national preservation. It was one we undertook alone, not because we wanted to, but because we were left no other option. We now turn to this council, not for permission, but for recognition. Recognition that Israel did what the world should have done. Recognition that the Iranian regime violated every obligation they ever undertook. Recognition that Israel had the undeniable right and duty to defend its people from extermination. We urge the Council to condemn Iran's nuclear violations. We urge the Council to finally acknowledge the existential threat Iran poses to the world. We urge the Council to join us in our commitment to prevent their genocidal dreams from becoming a reality. But we also expect something even more basic: moral clarity. Stop equating aggressors with defenders. Stop treating a genocidal regime and a democracy under siege as two sides of the same coin. The Iranian regime was preparing for war. This war would have stretched across the Middle East, to Europe, to Asia, to the Americas. It would have been against the international order. We acted to prevent a threat that would endanger not only Israel, but the entire world. We will not sit quietly while our people are targeted. Not again, not ever. Empty words will not stop Iran. Israel will. We did not wait for the bomb to fall, and we will never allow that day to come. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Israel for his statement, and I give the floor now to the representative of Iraq.
شكرا جزيلا السيدة رئيسة المجلس على استجابتك لعقد هذه الجلسة.
To our request convening this session, I'd like to thank the USG and the Director General of the IEA for their briefings. Madam President. Iraq expresses its deep concern and condemnation of the dangerous military aggression committed by the Israeli entity against the territories of the Islamic Republic of Iran, including their blatant violation of Iraq's sovereignty and the inviolability of its airspace.
We just heard the Israeli representative addressing the UN Security Council this evening on Israel's attack on Iran and their subsequent retaliation. He began by saying, as we speak, hundreds of ballistic missiles are striking Israel's cities, neighborhoods and communities. They're striking population centers, not military bases, not Air Force bases. And he ended by saying the Iranian regime was preparing for war. We acted to prevent a threat that would endanger not only Israel, but the rest of the world. Well, tonight, Iran has launched a series of retaliatory attacks against Israel, with missiles raining down on Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, injuring at least 16 people. The action comes after Israel defended what it called preemptive strikes on military and nuclear targets in Iran, claiming the Tehran regime posed a danger to its very survival. Israel struck military and nuclear targets in Iran, with local media reporting that at least 78 people had been killed and more than 300 injured. In Washington, President Trump warned Tehran in the strongest possible words to make a nuclear deal and threatened what he called further brutal action if there was no agreement. And tonight, the United Nations Security Council met to discuss the crisis. We'll have more on that in a moment for you, but let's start with the scenes of sirens and missile attacks this evening in Tel Aviv. And our Jerusalem correspondent who's there for us, Alistair Bunkle. What's the situation at the moment? Because we were reporting earlier that there was to be a third strike from Iran.
Well, it has been a very long day here in the Middle East. It has been, with no exaggeration, a monumental day here in the Middle East. It started in the early hours of this morning when millions in Israel were woken to sirens and then the news that Israel was carrying out waves of airstrikes in Iran. Those airstrikes continued throughout the day. People here in Jerusalem and in Israel stayed close to bunkers and to shelters, awaiting the response from Iran. That response came this evening in multiple attacks, hundreds of ballistic missiles fired at central Israel, some of them impacting in Tel Aviv. Iran waited to recover, to regroup, and then this evening it issued its response to the Israeli attacks today. After hours of Israeli attacks on its country, Iran launched a response. More than 100 ballistic missiles were fired at Israel in multiple salvos. As sirens sounded across the country, there were interceptions over Jerusalem and a number of missiles impacted in central Tel Aviv. There were reports some people were likely wounded and buildings damaged. This attack on a major Israeli civilian center could well trigger an escalation in this war. Israel's operation began shortly after 3 a.m. on Friday morning. Targets in Iran's capital, Tehran, were some of the first to be hit. 200 Israeli aircraft took part in the opening hours, hitting around 100 targets, including leaders of the Revolutionary Guard and nuclear scientists. With Iran's air defenses mostly destroyed, they carried out wave after wave of attacks throughout the day. Israel's Prime Minister justified the operation as a fight for his country's very existence.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival. This operation will continue for as many days as it takes to remove this threat. For decades, the tyrants of Tehran have brazenly, openly called for Israel's destruction. They've backed up their genocidal rhetoric with a program to develop nuclear weapons.
The key nuclear facility in Natanz where uranium is enriched, was hit multiple times as Israel tried to penetrate the chambers deep underground. Iran said that civilians, including children, were killed in some of the strikes and vowed to retaliate.
This barbaric act that violated all international commitments confirms the criminal nature of the illegitimate Zionist regime that has based its existence on occupation, aggression, and killing children.
Missile launchers in Iran were also targeted. Mid-morning, Iran launched 100 drones towards Israel, but they were all shot down before they reached Israeli airspace. In an extraordinary covert operation, Mossad spies operating deep inside Iran took out ballistic missile sites from the ground, using their own drones smuggled into the country in preparation. Israel has warned that the operation could continue for days, possibly weeks. It is a dangerous moment for the Middle East. The region is on edge, but Iran has few allies coming to its defense. World leaders have urged de-escalation, but Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu see this as an historic opportunity to destroy Iran's nuclear program and maybe even the regime itself. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Well, Alistair joins us now, as does our US correspondent Mark Stone in Washington. We'll hear more from them in just a moment. But we have heard from Benjamin Netanyahu this evening. Let's take a look at his address.
The Islamic regime, which has oppressed you for nearly 50 years, threatens to destroy my country, the State of Israel. The objective of Israel's military operation is to remove this threat, both the nuclear threat and the ballistic missile threat to Israel. And as we achieve our objectives, we're also clearing the path for you to achieve your objective, which is freedom. Israel's fight is not with you. It's not with you, the brave people of Iran, whom we respect and admire. Our fight is with our common enemy, a murderous regime that both oppresses you and impoverishes you. Brave people of Iran, your light will defeat the darkness. I'm with you. The people of Israel are with you.
Let's return to Alistair live in Jerusalem for us. The address that we've just seen is particularly aimed at the Iranian population.
Well, I think one of the real sort of unspoken factors about what has happened today is the potential to topple the regime in Iran. Now, obviously, Israel is not going to come out and explicitly say that that is its intention. Its justification for carrying out these strikes is to target Iran's nuclear facilities and to either hamper or potentially, if it could do, destroy Iran's ability to produce a nuclear weapon. But in that clip that you heard from Benjamin Netanyahu, he hints potentially at more, speaking about delivering freedom for the people of Iran, saying that he stands by the people of Iran against a murderous regime. And so as we move into the next hours and days, and this is a war that will last, at the very least, a number of days, I think we might see an expansion of Israeli airstrikes to cover different parts of Iran, both geographically, but in terms of the nature of targets that they engage. And actually, I think that the attacks on Israel tonight and the impacts in Tel Aviv, a major urban civilian center, might very likely give Israel the impetus and, in their view at the very least, the justification to widen their attacks against Iran tomorrow and in the days ahead.
Yes, Netanyahu did say that he was clearing a path for the Iranian people to achieve your freedom. He said that he respected them, but that they had been done a disservice by the regime, very much appealing to them to topple the regime from within.
Very much so. Whether or not they will result in the toppling of the supreme leader in the regime, we'll have to wait and see. Whether or not that is an objective they will try and achieve themselves by targeting the supreme leader, again, we will have to wait and see. There isn't any precedent for this. That said, the events of today did remind me in some respects as to what Israel did to Hezbollah, striking at the senior officials initially around Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah, really sort of decapitating the command structure, sending Hezbollah, and in this case today, sending the Iranian leadership into complete disarray, and then with Hezbollah eventually targeting the leader itself, Hassan Nasrallah. So we'll see whether or not Israel does decide to hit the supreme leader Khamenei, or whether or not it does limit its strikes to military targets and nuclear targets. But I really think that that speech from Benjamin Netanyahu was pretty explicit in the way Israel sees this. It's not just an opportunity for Israel to try and push Iran's nuclear program back significantly. It is also an opportunity to really degrade Iran's military capabilities, and as I say, potentially an opportunity for them to bring about regime change in Iran.
Alistair, for the moment, thank you. Well, tonight the UN Security Council has been meeting to discuss this latest escalation in the region in turmoil and focus too on what Donald Trump will do in response to the crisis. Our US correspondent Mark Stone is in Washington, D.C. for us. We've not long ago heard from the Israeli representative and also the Iranian representative, who was very clear about saying that the United States was complicit in this attack.
Yes, and he also gave us the first official word on how many people the Iranians believe died and were injured as a consequence of the Israeli attack. He said 78 people, including senior military officials, were killed in the strikes, and that more than 320 people were injured. He claimed most of them were civilians, and as you said, the Iranian UN envoy also accused the United States of, as he put it, providing intelligence, political support for the Israeli strikes. For me, Gillian, there are two striking things to reflect on, I guess, at the end of this extraordinary day. The first is the audacity and the apparent success of the Israeli strike. Israel did overnight last night something that successive Israeli governments have wanted to do for over 3 decades. And in one strike, or one night of strikes, they managed to decapitate so many parts of the Iranian government, whether it was taking out nuclear scientists, taking out nuclear facilities, taking out the ballistic missiles, or many of them, that would form the counterattack that they knew would come, and taking out so many senior officials of the Iranian government in the Iranian military echelons as well. You know, all the people in Iran who would have met this morning under normal circumstances to ascertain how they would react to what Israel had done are dead. That is how successful, from an Israeli perspective, the attack has been. The other observation is America's response, or lack of. And what I mean by that is the fact that we haven't seen Donald Trump today, a man who loves to be front and center, who loves to own a moment, who loves to seize the opportunity to be seen to take control. He released a lengthy statement this morning on social media, on Truth Social, where he appeared to be playing the good cop to Netanyahu's bad cop, effectively saying, look, Iran, we told you, we tried to get you a deal, we tried to talk to you around the negotiating table, you didn't want to do it, now look what's happened. That was the essence of his statement on social media, but we haven't seen him. We know that he met his National Security Council this morning in the Situation Room. We don't know what was discussed, and no word at all this afternoon from the American president. He's trying to thread a very tricky needle right now. He is a president that likes to portray himself as a peacemaker. He wanted to create peace in the Middle East. It really does not feel tonight like that peace in the Middle East is anywhere close.
Indeed. Mark, thank you. Well, the Prime Minister has spoken to Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss today's events. Earlier this evening, before the Iranian strikes against Israel, we heard this from the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy.
I spoke to my Iranian counterpart today to urge restraint at this time and calm. I recognise that this is a moment of grave peril in the Middle East. All of us recognise Israel's right to protect its citizens at this time and its security. We have long been concerned about Iran's nuclear ambitions, and as you know, the United Kingdom has been working alongside France and Germany for a considerable time to deal with those issues diplomatically.
Let's go now to our political correspondent Nick Martin in Downing Street. And Nick, a busy night of diplomacy for the Prime Minister. We heard the Foreign Secretary there speaking, and he did go on to say in that interview that the UK wasn't involved in the strike. But what he didn't say is whether they were made aware beforehand.
The Prime Minister has spent today talking to Western leaders in an attempt to send a message to both Israel and Iran that might have prevented some of the scenes that we're seeing unfolding across Israel tonight, and potentially any future escalations in the days and weeks to come. The message from the UK government has been this, that whilst they have been concerned about Iran's nuclear programme for many years now, on the other hand, Israel, they say, has the right to defend itself. However, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has also said now is the time to talk and to calm things down. Diplomacy and de-escalation, in his words. He spoke a few hours ago now to Donald Trump. Both men, we're told, agreed that diplomacy and dialogue was necessary. At about 5 o'clock, he spoke to Benjamin Netanyahu. And earlier in the day, the Prime Minister had spoken to the French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. He also chaired a meeting of COBRA, the emergency committee, where senior ministers and senior military figures met to try and discuss the situation. But what's clear as the day's gone on is just how much in the dark the UK government appeared to be about this whole operation. David Lammy said just in that interview there that Israel was acting unilaterally, that they had no part to play. So much so that David Lammy was meant to be on a plane this morning to Washington, D.C. to meet one of his counterparts, and at the last minute, when all this started to unfold, was turned around to try and assist the Foreign Office operation. This is now a gravely serious situation. The Prime Minister is positioning himself with other Western leaders in trying to calm things down. But as we see in Israel tonight, that is far from happening. The Prime Minister due to travel to Canada for G7. He'll meet Donald Trump, and this unfolding situation is sure to be very high on the agenda.
Nick, thank you very much.
So I
just want to bring you some breaking news, and this is regarding casualties in Israel. We're just hearing that 34 people have been injured in a rocket strike on the Gush Dan, in the Gush Dan area. This is very close to Tel Aviv. The people injured include one woman who's been critically injured, one man seriously injured, and 2 moderately injured, and 30 lightly injured. The woman's around 60 years old in a critical condition in Bellinson Hospital. And the man who's about 65 years old.
Beautiful parade coming up on Saturday. We do. What's your biggest expectations for that? And I've got a second question in regards to Gavin Newsom. Go ahead and talk about this big, beautiful parade.
It's such a, thank you, Brian. It's such a,
30 individuals with light injuries,
I think, important moment for this country.
To Shilov, Sheba and Bellinson hospitals. Additionally, 13 people have been suffering from anxiety, and they were evacuated from the scene. So that's the very latest that we have on casualties in Israel tonight. Let's get some more details now of what's happened today. The Israeli military said Iran fired fewer than 100 missiles, most of which were either intercepted or fell short of their target. A number of missiles did breach Israel's Iron Dome, injuring people on the ground and causing damage in Tel Aviv. There are now reports of dozens of injuries across the country.
It's one of the serious hits we've seen recently. Probably, as you know, in the last 2 years, we have many incidents of missile and rockets from all kinds of different areas, from the Hezbollah in Lebanon, from Gaza, and from now from Iran. And we are here to help them to search and rescue all the trapped people inside, all the innocent civilians, and take them to a safer shelter, to rescue places, to hotels, everywhere we can take them, and of course treat all the injured and help all the helpless people.
Well, just 6 months ago, Iran's foreign minister told Sky News that Israel would be crazy to attack its nuclear sites. A lot has changed since then, including a nuclear deal proposed by Washington and a new assessment of how close Iran is to making nuclear bombs. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, has this assessment.
So Israel has finally attacked Iran's nuclear program. It was a massive, sophisticated military operation involving at least 200 fighter jets and thousands of personnel. It's thought to have taken years to plan. The primary target's Iran's nuclear enrichment sites and its ballistic missile program. Blasts were first reported at around 3:30 in the morning in Tehran. Israel's biggest ever operation against Iran was underway. Natanz, a remote location in the desert, which is at the heart of Iran's nuclear program, was among those hit. The global atomic watchdog, the IAEA, says no signs of radiation have yet been detected. Before they did any of this, the Israelis were trying to assassinate the entire top brass of Iran's military and intelligence agencies, most of them in their homes in the dead of night. At least 20 senior commanders are reported dead, from Iran's highest-ranking military officer to the commander-in-chief of Iran's Revolutionary Guards and many others in between. The intention to destabilize Iran's entire command and control elite. So what happens next? Well, Israel says there could be days of this. Iran is, it seems, still weighing its response. It could launch another huge drone and missile barrage against Israel, as it did in October. US intelligence estimates that Iran has more than 3,000 ballistic missiles and has been increasing production. And it has thousands of these Shahad drones, some of which they've already launched against Israel. Exactly how many they have is not clear, but they're much cheaper to produce and often harder to detect. The Iranians could activate their proxies in the region, the Houthis in Yemen, Shia militia groups in Iraq, and a much depleted Hezbollah in Lebanon. And Iran's always warned it could strike back at US bases in the Middle East, highlighted here in places like Qatar, Kuwait, and Iraq. The Americans say they weren't involved in the attack, but Iran will not believe them. The Iranians may try and destabilize the oil market by attacking tankers and installations in the Gulf. A fifth of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, around 20 million barrels a day. One of the busiest and most important strategic waterways in the world would then become a war zone. Donald Trump says Iran could still make a deal and save itself from more Israeli attacks. But so far, the tone from Tehran has been one of defiance.
Just want to bring you some breaking news now, and it's the details of the King's birthday honours which have just been released. There's confirmation that former England football captain David Beckham has been knighted as part of the honours for his services to sport and charity, having partnered with UNICEF for an anti-malaria campaign. Actor Gary Oldman, who played Harry Potter's godfather in several of the movie's franchises, has been recognised for his services to drama. West End performer Elaine Page, who became an overnight star with her performance as Ava Peron in Andrew Lloyd Webber's hit Evita, has received a damehood. Included too the Who's frontman Sir Roger Daltrey for services to charity.
The whole scene, but with what price? What are the Iranians going to accept and what the Israelis are going to accept? And we know on Sunday there was supposed to be a sixth round for the nuclear negotiations. Is this even happening or not happening? We don't have a clear Iranian stance in this regard, by the way. So we don't know if they're going to show up or not, though the Iranian television said there's nothing going to happen. especially that nuclear facilities have been hit. Fordo was hit today, Esfahan was hit, Natanz was hit, and we heard Grossi talking about the radiations of all these things.
How much damage has actually been done to these nuclear facilities, and how much does it set back Iran's nuclear program? Because this is, after all, Netanyahu's stated aims for these attacks.
Well, I'll refer back to Grossi's latest interview with Jerusalem Post when he said it's a very complicated, deep in the ground nuclear program. Now, we don't know. No one went there and saw. What Grossi said today is that those infrastructure, the infrastructure and the facilities in Natanz mainly that were destroyed were on the surface. But what about this, the facility inside in the heart of the earth? Was it hit? Was it? We don't know. And this is going to stay a secret probably till we see pictures or there's any kind of reports in this regard. Of course, what Israel wants is to destroy Iran's nuclear facilities, the nuclear program. But according to observers, it's easier to destroy the system, the establishment, than destroying the nuclear program.
Okay, Ali, many thanks indeed for your many long hours here helping us cover this extensive story. Thanks very much. Well, you're watching Al Jazeera, and here's a reminder of elements from our top story. Tel Aviv has been under attack by hundreds of Iranian missiles launched towards Israel. Israeli media are reporting that at least 40 people have been injured. Israel's defense minister says Iran has crossed a red line by firing missiles at civilians. Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei delivered a pre-recorded address to the nation vowing revenge. He says Tehran will attack Israel without mercy and that Israel has, quote, launched a war. And just hours earlier, explosions were heard near one of Iran's largest nuclear facilities. Iranian air defenses have reportedly shot down an Israeli drone in the vicinity of Fordo. At least 78 people have been killed in Israeli attacks, including senior military figures and nuclear scientists. Well, we're joined now by Giorgio Cafiero. He's chief executive and founder of Gulf State Analytics. That's a geopolitical risk consultancy based in Washington, D.C. And he joins us from there. First of all, I just want to get your reaction to the day's events, Israel's attacks, surprise attacks on Iran, and the speed with which Iran retaliated.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the network. Good to be with you. So yes, obviously so much has happened within the past 24 hours. Israel waged these unprecedented strikes against Tehran and other parts of Iran. And then only about 18 hours later, the Iranians waged an intense counterattack, firing these missiles at Israel. And, you know, I think it's very clear that a war has started. How long this war is going to last, we don't know. This could be a conflict that drags on for quite some time. And we're at a very, very early stage, still within the first 24 hours. So way too early to predict how it's going to end. But I think the way that this eventually ends will have a lasting impact on both Israel and Iran as two heavily armed countries in the Middle East.
What are the options for de-escalation as far as you see them?
Well, I am not terribly optimistic about these hostilities de-escalating anytime soon. However, I think it is interesting to consider the possibility of Russia being a diplomatic player here. The Kremlin has offered to play some sort of a mediating role, and it will be interesting to see if Tel Aviv and Tehran at some point, maybe some point relatively soon, maybe quite a ways down the line, decide to take the Kremlin up on this offer to sort of be a diplomatic bridge. But I think right now, Iran is not interested in restraint or de-escalation. I think right now, Iran is focused on revenge. Iran is determined to send Israel, and by extension, really the rest of the world, a message that waging such strikes against Iran meets very, very serious consequences. That is the message that Tehran is sending out right now.
Absolutely. I mean, Iran is talking of hits against economic and energy infrastructure if it's hit in a similar manner, and that would be a major escalation, wouldn't it? Another one.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, last year, beginning in April, we saw so-called new rules of engagement in terms of the Iran-Israel hostilities, with the shadow war giving way to the state-to-state confrontations. But this is at a whole new level. The attacks the counterattacks that Iran has been waging against Israel, really unprecedented for the Israelis living in Tel Aviv. And I'm sure your viewers have been seeing all this footage on social media and the formal media. This is really not something the people of Tel Aviv are used to. And at the same time, this is really the first time the Iranian homeland has been struck by a foreign state this scale since the 1980s, when the Iran-Iraq war was taking place. So very, very unprecedented for the hostilities between Israel and Iran. Extremely dangerous situation. We do not know when or in what ways this is going to escalate, possibly spill into other countries in the region. But I think everyone is justifiably concerned about this escalation completely spiraling out of control and becoming even more of a regional, perhaps global crisis.
What are the risks to the wider region here?
Well, I think one of the important questions that we need to be asking, or at least considering, has to do with the possibility of Iran targeting U.S. assets, military personnel in other countries in the neighborhood. If the Iranians were to go there, that would certainly bring the United States in much more than the U.S. actually is involved in the hostilities right now. The U.S. has many, many bases in countries around Iran. I think there is obviously reason to be concerned about the conflict spilling into those countries. Not saying that Iran will definitely do that, but that certainly is a scenario to consider. And I think we'll have to, obviously wait and see.
Okay, we will indeed. Giorgio Cafiero, many thanks indeed for taking the time to join us with your thoughts there from Washington, D.C.
Good to be with you.
Well, the UN Security Council has been meeting to discuss Israel's strikes on Iran. The Russian UN ambassador Vasily Nebenzia spoke earlier and condemned Israel for its attack on Iran, accusing it of disregarding legal norms.
This completely unprovoked attack, no matter what Israel says, is a gross violation of the UN Charter and international law. One is left with the impression that the leadership of Israel is convinced that they have a completely free hand in the region. They think they can flout any legal norms and replace all international bodies, including the Security Council and the IAEA. The Russian Federation strongly condemns this action by Israel. Israel's military attack pushes the region to the brink of a large-scale war.
Well, meanwhile, the US has warned Iran it should not target American infrastructure in the region.
The United States was informed of the strikes ahead of time, but was not militarily involved in these strikes. Our absolute foremost priority is the protection of U.S. citizens, personnel, and forces in the region. As Secretary Rubio said, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. Let me be crystal clear. No government, proxy, or independent actor should target American citizens, American bases, or other American infrastructure in the region. The consequences for Iran would be dire.
Thomas Countryman is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for International Security and Non-Proliferation. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Great to have you with us. I want to first of all get an idea from you, your thoughts on the U.S. response to the attacks by Israel on Iran and the escalation that we're seeing in the region.
Thank you for having me here. Let me say first that I'm deeply concerned about the civilians in both Iran and Israel who will probably be the primary victims of Israel's reckless military action. The United States, for 25 years, has discouraged the Israeli government, and especially Prime Minister Netanyahu, from attacking Iran. 5 U.S. presidents, including Trump in his first term, resisted the Israeli effort to have the United States military fight Israel's conflict with Iran. It is not clear that President Trump this time discouraged Israel from doing so. And Trump now seeks to use the threat of further Israeli military attacks on Iran as negotiating leverage with Iran. This is, if that's what he's doing, it is a profoundly misguided strategy. It is only the United States that has the capability to de-escalate the situation by asking its ally Israel to refrain from further actions and to reiterate that we can negotiate a meaningful agreement with Iran that will prevent any future acquisition of nuclear weapons. It's difficult to foresee President Trump doing that, but it remains the best bet for both Iran and the United States to continue to choose diplomacy over escalation.
As you say, Trump is not showing any signs of asking Israel to de-escalate. Instead, it's only talking to Iran and demanding that it comes to the negotiating table and make a deal.
Yes, I agree with you that I don't see any sign of that from the president himself. I hope he has advisors who can point out to him that this is a dangerous situation for the United States as well. I think Trump is sincere in his desire to see peace in the Middle East, as in Ukraine. But the problem with choosing friends like Benjamin Netanyahu or Vladimir Putin is that they will pursue their military ambitions regardless of the difficult position that it puts the United States into.
To what extent do you think the U.S. will be dragged into this war?
I hope that Iran shows some wisdom and does not retaliate against U.S. bases, U.S. forces, U.S. citizens in the region. That is what Netanyahu is hoping for, that it would draw the U.S. into an active support role for Israel's attacks. So if Tehran shows that kind of wisdom and limits its response to Israeli forces, then I think it is still possible for the United States to avoid becoming a party to this war.
If we look at Iran's nuclear program, Netanyahu's stated aim is to eliminate it. But at the end of the day, do you think these attacks are going to slow down progress in the nuclear development, or are they simply going to speed it up and make it more secretive?
They will slow down progress. They will not eliminate Iran's nuclear program. The consequences of the attack are manifold. First, it will increase the voices of those in Iran's internal debate who wish to go full speed forward on development of a nuclear weapon. And all U.S. intelligence agencies have said that Iran is not currently pursuing a weaponization program. It may cause Iran to withdraw from the NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which will further increase the risk. And finally, Israel's actions will make it far more difficult for the International Atomic Energy Agency to verify the state of Iran's nuclear program. So yes, I think the result will be that Iran will pursue more secretive and more dangerous nuclear programs that will further put the region at risk.
I'm wondering how much impetus the UN Nuclear Watchdog report that came out earlier this week gave Israel? Because for the first time in 20 years, it stated that Iran was not compliant with the NPT, with its obligations. Did Israel perhaps see this as a green light?
I doubt that Israel saw it as a green light. I think these plans have been in the work for many months. The decision that was taken this week was by the Board of Governors of the Atomic Agency, not the Director General or the Technical Secretariat, and it was not unexpected. The fact is that Iran is out of compliance, not just with the 2015 JCPOA, but with its other signed obligations to the IAEA. So that was not a surprise, but it will certainly be used by Mr. Netanyahu as a justification for his unilateral action.
So why do you think he did make these strikes now?
As opposed to last week or a year ago, that's hard for me to say. But I think the simplest answer is because the United States and Iran were involved in serious negotiations that could have led to an agreement that Netanyahu has opposed no matter what the terms are. And so I think it was a very conscious effort to sabotage those diplomatic negotiations, to try to show his own people and the world, and particularly the U.S. government, that only military action is the appropriate response to Iran's nuclear challenge.
That's Thomas Countryman, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for International Security and Non-Proliferation, joining us there from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, the Israeli attacks on Iran took place as Tehran was engaged in indirect talks with the U.S. over its nuclear program. Engagement with Iran dates back to 2015, when Western nations signed a landmark nuclear deal with Iran. It enacted limitations to Tehran's nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. But in 2018, US President Donald Trump withdrew unilaterally and reimposed sanctions. That's despite opposition from other signatories to the pact. As Trump took office for a second term, he began pushing for a new nuclear deal. Iran and the US have so far engaged in 5 rounds of indirect talks. A day ago, and for the first time in 20 years, the UN's watchdog formally stated in a resolution Iran's failing to meet its nuclear obligations. The agency says the country had enriched a record amount of uranium to near weapons grade. Yossi Beilin is the former Israeli Minister of Justice. He says it's still possible for both sides to return to the negotiating table.
I really hope that this confrontation will not go on for a very long while, because eventually it is the people on both sides who are suffering and are engaged in paying the price. And, you know, we are very good at bickering. I mean, we know how to blame each other, and it may be endless, but the suffering is there. And I really hope that after a few days, it will be possible to stop the confrontation, to return to the negotiating table, and to have an agreement. In my view, it is not impossible. The whole story of the nuclear capacity goes back decades and decades, when the Shah was the one who decided upon the need for Iran to have nuclear power. And then when the Ayatollah Khomeini came to power, he was the one who stopped it, because he said that Iran should not have nuclear power. And then things changed, maybe because of the war with Iraq or whatever. And if you espouse to this change of policy of Iran, the repeating slogans of saying that Israel has no place in the Middle East, that it should be wiped out, the two things together, this claim to get rid of Israel totally, without any condition, by the way. They don't want us to do anything. That's just that we should not exist. And the nuclear power, and what you just referred to, the IAEA decision of the other day, then I believe that Israel has a strong case in that situation. You know, I'm not a supporter of the Israeli government, and I am criticizing it on many issues, especially on the Palestinian issue and its unwillingness to make peace with the leadership of the Palestinians, of the PLO, and negotiate the two-state solution with them. But in that case of Iran, I believe that Iran has no case at all.
Well, joining us now is Al senior political analyst Marwan Bashar. He's joining us from Paris. So how likely, Marwan, do you think it is that we will see these two sides around the negotiating table anytime soon?
You don't mean Israel and Iran, right?
Oh, US and Iran.
I don't think it's going to be anytime soon. I think it's becoming clearer and clearer every hour how much the United States is complicit in the attack on Iran, and how much the whole diplomacy thing was more of a cover than a real attempt at reaching a deal, especially that even during the negotiations, there was such a change in the American tactics and American position. Mr. Witkoff at one point was saying we accept 3.5, and then he said we don't accept any enrichment whatsoever in Iran, and so on and so forth. It just went on. It sounded to me like there was a lot of procrastination going on. But again, you don't know if this is intentional or just incompetence, because if there's anything that we've known the past 3-4 months since January 20th is that this administration, when it comes to foreign policy, is incredibly chaotic and mostly incompetent, dealing with Russia, Ukraine, trade, China, Israel, Middle East. There are zero successes with a lot of talk about good intention and wanting peace. So I don't know if they're going to go back to negotiations or when. What I do know is that the situation is quite tense. It could be escalating. There is a kind of a more pragmatic leader in Iran that reminds me of the likes of Khatami back in the early part of the century, that is reasonable, that wanted to make a deal. Can he now still make a deal, or has he been so weakened by the attacks that, as I said to you earlier, it seemed to me that Israel didn't just bomb the nuclear program, it bombed the moderates in Iran.
It bombed a huge amount of top military brass as well. I mean, it's hard to overstate, isn't it, the damage that Israel has managed to inflict on Iran militarily in terms of its power structure and in terms of its nuclear facilities.
Well, there's absolutely no quarrel about that. Israel has a military superiority thanks to the United States. You could also say it's not Israel, right? It's American-supported Israeli army, because in the end of the day, everything that Israel used in that bombing is American. Financed, armed, technology, intelligence, diplomatic support, and everything else. So this is totally 100% proxy by the United States. And at the same time, as your earlier guest said, there is a room for the so-called the tail wag the dog theory, meaning that it is Netanyahu that is manipulating the American president. But one can also see it as a totality. On the one hand, Netanyahu tries to manipulate American presidents throughout the years. On the other hand, Israel works like an attack dog for the United States and the Middle East to preserve American interests. Both of them work out. But my main issue here with you and for our viewers around the world about, if we can summarize the day, right? What are we talking about mostly? Let's forget about nuclear this and that and soldiers and so on. The fundamental problem today, like the fundamental problem throughout in the Middle East, is that everyone seems to think, especially Israel, that ends justify the means. That you can do whatever you want to do, violate all laws of humanity, of international law, and so on and so forth, because you think that your end game, your cause is more important than the other. Like Iran doesn't have right of self-defense, but Israel does. So Israel takes that right in order to bomb Iran. But if Iran bombs Israel, no, then Iran does not have the right of self-defense. So this idea of the ends justify the means is the root cause of most of the problem in the Middle East. And Israel has been a driver. It carries genocide in the name of self-defense. It carries invasion of different countries in the name of self-defense. It maintains occupation for 6 decades in the name of self-defense. Now it's going to bomb more and more in Iran in the name of self-defense. That's not how international law works. Okay. And certainly that's not how the Middle East needs to work its problems through in the weeks and months to come.
Okay, that's Marwan Bashar joining us there from Paris. As ever, Marwan, many thanks indeed for joining us with your analysis. Just before we go, a reminder of what we're seeing this hour, a live shot from Tel Aviv in the aftermath of the extraordinary scenes that we saw earlier, Iran striking the city in a wave of attacks around 18 GMT. Hundreds of ballistic missiles were launched. Most of them were intercepted by the Iron Dome in Israel. We're going to take a short break and then I'll be back in just a moment with all the very latest development and analysis of the growing conflict that we're seeing between Israel and Iran.
Investigative journalism.
We're in a hospital in the south of Lebanon which is overwhelmed with patients. Israel has refused to withdraw despite a ceasefire agreement.
Global experts in discussion.
The American empire is over, and we are on a down.
Voices from different corners.
And you were beaten and tortured.
They come in, they pick you up and take you in for interrogations and beatings whenever they like.
Programs that open your eyes to an alternative view of the world today on Al Jazeera.
ماتت ماما وبابا وخيي حمود ماتوا